911 operators of Reddit. What's the strangest, serious emergency you've heard? Story 1, not me, but my cousin. She had this lady who would call regularly and often make up stories, most likely due to loneliness, but they still had to send someone out every time. So one day when they got a call from her, they figured it would be another one of those calls. Cousin 911, what's your emergency? Heard there's a lion in my living room. Cousin, there's a lion in your living room. What's it doing? Her pauses to ask it what it was doing. I don't know, just standing there. Can you send someone over? Turned out there actually was a lion cub in her living room that had escaped from a circus or something nearby. Edit formatting. Story 2, the very first emergency call I took by myself during training. Trainer was hooked into my phone and could jump in whenever. I answered 911 while my trainer was trying to grab a cup of coffee from the machine long cords, and as soon as the phone connected, there was what sounded like an explosion and people screaming all over the place. Scared the Jesus out of my trainer, who sprinted back to the desk thinking I had just picked up some huge disaster or accident. Takes over the call, starts asking questions. And it turns out what we heard was just rushing water from a hot water heater that ruptured and was spewing water all over these two girls' apartment. And they were freaking out, not knowing what to do about it. Bonus story had a similar call a few years later, picked up to a bunch of people being loud, sounding panicked, talking about someone being locked in a car. Thought was a child locked in a car, a very high priority call for my agency, due to being in Florida and a few recent deaths. So I put the call in as urgent, while trying to get anyone on the phone to actually talk to me, but then I hear a door open and someone in the background scream, ITS out. The chicken is free phone disconnects Florida. Story 3, lots of calls from elderly people hallucinating because of a UTI. One woman had been following CPR instructions, and when the crew arrived, she was doing very gentle chest compressions on her slightly confused, but very much alive, cat. Story 4, obligatory, not 911 operator. In the son of the caller, my dad called 911 late one night to report hitting a 6-foot-tall chicken while driving and running off into the ditch. He had just crashed his car, and his voice was a bit shaky on the phone. So the operator asked him to repeat himself a couple of times, and then promised to send someone to help. The first cop on scene got out of his car with a breathalyzer in hand. By the time he got to the back of my dad's car, he was laughing hysterically over his radio, telling people that it wasn't a DUI call. My dad actually did hit a 6-foot-tall chicken. And that's the story about the night my dad and all the local cops learned about emu farming. Story 5, from an older post. My mom was a dispatcher for 20 years. The eeriest call she ever told me about was one that started off with no voice, only breathing. She kept asking yes or no questions, working out a system to guess what was going on. Eventually, he could talk a little bit, and said the person who heard him was still there, so the officers went in, guns drawn. Head said the person was there, but hadn't specified that they were dead. Turns out the guy couldn't talk because his throat was sliced open, which he had done to himself, to make it look like his wife, whom he had just murdered, had attacked him first. Story 6, 911, what's your emergency? There's a pig in the road, a big one. Sir, where are you? At the stoplight. It's the biggest pig I have ever seen. Get someone here now. One stoplight town. The bar is near the intersection. How big is the pig? About the size of Volkswagen. How much have you had to drink? I'm not drunk. It's a giant pig the size of a small car. What is wrong with you people? Officers show up to find a full-grown hippo that had escaped from the local wild animal park. Big pig. 8 of this was at 2:30 a.m. when the bars close. Story 7, not me, but my dad works in an emergency room, and one time he had to treat someone who had been attacked by an owl. The owl was unconscious on the side of the road, and she thought it was dead. Because she didn't want the children on the school bus to see the dead owl, she decided the best course of action would be to put the owl in the back of her car. Unfortunately, the owl wasn't dead. It woke up and attacked her. Story 8, we got a call from a woman having severe abdominal pains. Simple enough. We asked the normal questions. Are you feeling faint? Are you vomiting blood? Stuff like that. Then we asked if it was traumatic or not. Well, she eventually tells us that she had a tampon stuck inside of her for more than 20 days, and she thinks that might be why she's hurting. Bonus story, I heard someone else on a different thread that had a funny story. This guy and his wife were playing around with various vegetables, and the guy gets a carrot lodged up his, so they try to remove it so they wouldn't have to call 911. She used a pair of burger tongs and grabbed onto something and pulled, but she was actually pulling at his intestines. Fun. If you get something stuck, just call 911. I've heard it all before. I don't care that you have a vegetable garden in your rectum. I just want to get you help. Story 9, I've got one for you. The obligatory not 911, but ITLL tied together. So I work for an alarm monitoring company. I get an inbound call in the middle of the night from somewhere in Philadelphia. Guy on the line sounds real out of it. Drunk maybe. My first thought was it was someone calling in to cancel a false alarm. Messed up voice was them waking from sleep. Not uncommon. Some alarms that start going off in my head. The guy isn't making a whole lot of sense, and it's really hard to get basic information out of him. Eventually, I pieced together that he's a gas station worker, and he's been shot. For some reason, he dialed the alarm company instead of 911. We weren't even his alarm company. There's probably an old sticker in the shop somewhere, so I got no info on this guy. Mind you, we don't have any magical reverse phone lookup system, and our systems are locked down such that we can't access a web browser. Genius. I know, pulled out my phone, also not allowed, managed to look up a gas station with the inbound number in Philly called 911 and got police and medical out there. No idea how it ultimately shook out. Stayed on the line, keeping the guy conscious and talking until they got there, then disconnected. Story 10, I got dispatched for neck pain. Get there, find out a couple were having on a couch when the female heard a large pop in her head, followed by a splitting headache and nausea. We transport, and after a CT scan find that she somehow developed a tear in her arachnoid meningeal tissue, serious but humorous and odd. Story 11, my sister is an EMT in a small rural college town. Apparently, there have been more than one calls about horses collapsing and hurting their rider handler, broken arms, legs, trapped under horse, etc. When she was new to it, someone just described it as a collapsed horse, and she thought that they were supposed to treat the horse's condition. Story 12, not 911, and not me, but my favorited related call exchange was posted by Unursa Jackline and a telephone triage nurse. So not 911, but a 24-hour hotline for people to call when they're having a medical problem but aren't sure if they need to go to the ER or not. I have a few favorite stories, but I'll share this one. A quite pregnant, don't remember exactly how far along, but definitely past 30 weeks woman calls to say that her doctor told her to refrain from having for the rest of the pregnancy, and she didn't understand why. I looked at her file and saw she was having preterm contractions, so I explained that activity can cause contractions, so it was safer to abstain so the baby could stay inside as long as possible. She tearfully exclaims, "But how will I feed the baby?" Me, "I'm sorry, ma'am. Could you repeat that?" "Patient, how will I feed the baby?" If I can't have the patient was convinced that her baby was living off of her boyfriend's semen and that it would starve if they stopped having. I explained about the umbilical cord, etc. But she refused to believe me until I asked her about single moms, lesbian moms, etc., and asked how she, though their babies fed and grew. After a moment of silence, she thanked me and started hanging up the phone, but not before I heard her screaming her boyfriend's name. That man had a good thing going for a while there. I honestly wasn't sure if I felt more sorry for him or a baby growing up in that household. Story 13, heard this one the other day. Not from the perspective of an operator, but close. EMS responds to a call where a man reported having multiple potatoes stuck up his rectum colon. Not red potatoes, those big brown suckers. The kicker, I was washing my potatoes in the shower when I slipped and fell, and all the potatoes went up there. Oh, what? Story 14, we had a lady who would call all the time about people in her yard or on her house, usually doing nasty things, always a false alarm. This lady had been calling since way before I got my job, and even now, after I've switched agencies, she's probably still calling. She's mental, but not a danger to herself or others, so no real need to commit her involuntarily. Well, one day we get a call from her about a man at her house, causing the troubles for her. My supervisor, who had answered the call, finally got fed up and asked to speak to the man. To everyone's surprise, the woman handed the phone over to the man, and there was someone there. It was her brother. He was there trying to get her committed. We ended up, I believe, asking him to leave the property because he couldn't have her committed against her will at that time. Just goes to show you that crazy doesn't always mean wrong. Story 15, one ultra calm caller. Girlfriend is having a fit. Me, does she have any weapons? Him, just the egg she's throwing at me. Me, what is she wearing? Him, underwear. Two, took a call for a hostage situation in a cab once. The driver was talking to me, but try not to make it obvious. Passenger implied a weapon and wanted him to drive to the middle of nowhere so that he could rape him and the lady in the front seat. The driver ended up crashing into another car to cause a distraction. 3, screaming lady caller, HES, throwing the CAR thing at me. It was a hubcap ETA. 4, he flushed my weed, so I poured his beer out, and we bout TO, throw down. Second edit, I keep thinking of things. 5 guy, found his pet cat's head sitting upright on the table on his front porch. No body, called back later. Someone had placed the body in his car. Story 16, nothing really jumps out at me. As strangest I can think of, worst, scariest, dumbest, most infuriating, etc. Some good ones are people saying they locked themselves inside their car, getting ripped off by a hooker, someone stealing their things by things they meant a safe full of weed, a mugger going around, and hitting people in the neck with a taser, yelling surprise in a deep voice, then taking their phone wallets. Just so many 911 calls with people essentially calling and getting themselves arrested because they were in the wrong, and not the person they called on. Guy went jogging along the beach, came back to find his car gone. While driving him home after taking a report, we drove by it. He forgot where he parked, tried to let a guy off who was obviously up to some shady, tell him and his girlfriend to just go rent a room and rethink their lives. They stole the cop's cell phone. He made a call for them because their phone was dead. Ended up having a fucked into meth in his car. When he caught up to him later, guy got into a fight with a bunch of ducks, started losing, tried jumping a fence, slipped, and tore his open on the fence thinking about it. I do have one. Her boyfriend is bleeding in the shower. I try to get her to say where and how. She beats around the bush and doesn't come right out. We got the paramedic to tell us afterward. She's a nurse, and they were fooling around. She tried to catheterize him while he was hard. Ended up puncturing something, and they couldn't get the bleeding to stop. Story 17, the emergency itself wasn't particularly strange vaginal bleeding during pregnancy, nor was the call mine. But in training, I listened to a call that contained the following exchange. So she's bleeding now. Yep. Where is she bleeding from? From her bottom part. Which bottom part, sir? I need to be specific. Her rectum, front part, her... Wait, what? Sir, is she bleeding from her rectum or from the front? She's bleeding from her holy eye, responded to a man in his whitey-tighties, standing on the yellow lines in the middle of the road. Arrived on scene to find this to be true. The reason he was in the middle of the road was to practice his karate moves on cars. Dispatch was even having a hard time keeping from laughing. Story 18, okay. So my friend is a former 911 operator, and she told me that she got this call from what sounded like an old man. He was telling her that it's been a while, and that she should come back over. Like, hey, it's been so long. I miss you. Do you still remember the address? 123 Street. Remember, she assumed that he was just senile or something. Turns out he had someone in his house, and he didn't want them to know he was calling 911 edit okay. For clarification, she did dispatch someone just in case the old man was incapable of taking care of himself. BC, she thought he was senile, and that's how they found out. Story 19, strangest call. Kid who felt experimenty and lost to up his. Wasn't anything I could do but transport to the ER and try not to laugh. Most serious call, milk truck T-boned an Amish buggy going about 60 miles per hour. The buggy was in the wrong. It annihilated the buggy, and I don't remember for sure, but I'm pretty sure the occupants inside did not survive. I remember they got flown to the ER with massive trauma, but it was like 2007-2009. It's been an EMT for over 12 years now, going on 13. I feel old, lol. Pretty sure going to move back to volunteering soon. Story 20, a friend of the family was potentially still is a paramedic with the helicopter service here. I'm not sure if this was when he was a ground-based or in a helicopter, but he enjoyed this story. He was called out to a head trauma incident and arrived to find a man sitting in his living room, acting very normal for a call like that. So he asked what was wrong, and the man said, well, I've got this here, and turned to show a screwdriver buried to the hilt in his head. So the paramedic obviously said something along the lines of how that isn't good, and the man said, nah, it's all right, and began turning the screwdriver. They told him to stop. I had a professor who exploded a cat with a shotgun in an attempt to get out of a tree, and another who made his partner pass out by having a girl show him her eyeball that had popped out after a car accident. These are all anecdotal and may not be true, but they were stories I was told. Story 21, woman screaming that her drug addict partner had been bitten by her Varner dog. She was going on about how he loved the dog, and the dog was lovely normally, but her partner's finger was bleeding. When the crew got there, they reported back to the control room that the man's arm had been degloved from the elbow down, and the dog turned on him because the man was having with it. Just say no, kids. Story 22 was a 911 op for 5 years. Had a female call, screaming, he's stabbing me, he's stabbing me. She's get away from her husband who's going at her over and over with, and it becomes evident to me that she's moving around the house in an attempt to get away. I'm telling her, can you barricade yourself? Can you get away from him? Can you get out of the house? She told me that she's trying, and that interjects that her husband is blind. Now I'm really confused. She's not giving me much information typical with panicky victims in the heat of a crime, and I'm trying to figure out how she can't get away from a blind person. She gets quiet, and I can hear him saying all kinds of nasty things about her. Cops get there, secure the scene, and they fly her to a trauma center. She lived. Still, we were all standing around after, so confused that this woman couldn't escape a blind man from stabbing her. A family member was working in an emergency room and said the following case came in about a month ago. A guy got high on PCP. Suddenly thinks I'm a bit hungry and would like to have some eggs. Proceeds to cut out one of his testicles and fry it in a frying pan. His girlfriend walks in while he's doing that and goes, at which point he's like, oh, whoops, sorry, and tries to put his fried testicle back in his. Then he was in the hospital. I don't know the result, but I can guess. One day, I had walked in after getting a Subway sandwich. My shift started at 1 p.m., Co-workers had received both 911 and normal calls from a wife and mother about their husband's son. He was just walking around and talking about taking all the children to heaven and circling the house for hours. There was a newborn, a toddler, and I think a 5-year-old. It was on a weekend, and our chief advised that as long as he isn't acting dangerous or violent, Just odd. Then they can wait for a mental health warrant from the Justice of the Peace on Monday. It's East Texas, and it's a good 20 to 30-minute drive going the speed limit to get anywhere in the county, and sometimes over an hour from one end to another, if you know where you're going. Well, this continues up until about 11 p.m. The mother and wife are getting more and more antsy that he's been walking in circles all day and muttering the same thing for hours. Then I get a call that begins with a loud bang, screaming and crying from the wife and her newborn. The husband had killed his 2 sons and mother with a shotgun and was coming for her. She cried that why didn't we help them, and to please save me and my babies. And then after about 10 seconds, another bang. The wife was killed near instantly, and the baby had 1 to 2 pellets into its head and was making gurgling sounds before dying. After that, maybe a minute later, I heard another bang. The guy had put a slug into his shotgun and blasted the top portion of his face off, laid on the ground and drowned in his blood. And that's it. Story 23, my friend in the ER told me how someone passed out on an escalator and his hand was running onto the grate where the top of the escalator meets the floor for half an hour before someone found him. His hand was pretty messed up from what I heard. Story 24, I answered the phone and gave my usual 911. Do you need police, fire, ambulance? And the person on the other end just started screaming, BS, bees. I assumed that the bees are neither mugging him nor on fire, so I put through to ambulance because what the even. Story 25, obligatory, not a 911 operator. But my soon-to-be mother-in-law, she got a call that a guy and his roommate were doing drugs, heroin, and the caller's friend overdosed. So this absolute Mensa hooks up a couple wires to the inside of the toaster, turns the toaster on, and attaches the wires to his unconscious friend's testicles. Honestly, not sure if it successfully electrocuted the unconscious guy, but the caller definitely seemed to think it would wake his friend up. My mother-in-law's response, sir, please don't do that again. Story 26, my father used to be a cop, and during training, they listened to funny calls for some relief. One of the best ones was of a guy that called a wreck he had with a deer male. This was a while back. So he was in a phone booth when he started screaming. The stag was only unconscious and had started attacking the phone booth was in it. Story 27 posted this before, but the first call I took was from a blind, elderly male. He called because he had found his son on the floor of a bedroom. He was not responding, so I had him tilt his head back and listen for a breath. Nothing. He said he was warm, and he had talked with him less than 20 minutes prior. So I guided him through CPR. Compressions only because of the circumstances. He lived in a rural part of our county, and we were low on rigs. So we did this for about 12 minutes before help arrived on scene. EMS goes inside and immediately asks for PD. This isn't unusual. Sometimes loved ones can't or don't want to believe that it's too late. So we go through the motions until a trained eye is there. PD gets there and asks for a detective. This is also not unusual for younger deaths. 2 hours later, and still there it piques my curiosity. I called the first officer that arrived and found out that the poor man had been doing CPR on his now mostly headless son. He had been taking a nap and his son committed suicide with a shotgun. It woke him up but not quick enough for it to register as a gunshot. When I had asked him to tilt his head back, he did so by using his chin, which was still there. I think it worked out for the best because he had support there when he learned the truth, and it didn't make my job any tougher, but it definitely made for an unusual start to my dispatch career. Story 28, I was a 0 operator, not 911, but many small towns didn't have 911, so I got quite a few emergency calls. I got a call from a 13-year-old girl once that had just gotten home from school. She couldn't find her father, but there was an ominous note there that she had read to me. I had police on the way and told her to wait outside for them. Rather, I heard her walking around her house, going from room to room, opening doors looking for him. After about a minute, she let out a blood-curdling scream, yelling, HES here. HES here. HES here. He was hanging dead in the garage. It was a terrible call. I got a 15-minute break and had to get back on the board taking calls again. It's been almost 20 years, and I can still hear her voice. Story 29, for a year in college. I, as a 7-Eleven operator, for those not in the U.S., this is the national relay service provided for deaf or hard of hearing people who need to use the phone. Occasionally, in real 911 emergencies, people would misdial 711 instead. Happens a lot. And that's fine. We just keep you on the line and transfer to 911 for you. But by law, we are required to stay on the line until the call is completed in case our services are legitimately needed. So most of the time we mute ourselves and stay out of the way. But one time, I legit had a deaf person using a TTY device calling to report a break-in at her house. It is very important to understand what a TTY device is to understand the context of the story. So, I'll link a quick video first at the 37 seconds mark. You see a light flashing by the phone and TTY. This is how deaf people see when calls are coming in. The phone is then placed on the TTY, short for teletypewriter, and the deaf person can type on the TTY, which generates the chiming tones you hear. These tones get translated into letters and formulate text, which I can read on my system. And I type back using the same tones. Think of it as text messaging using chimes. It's very important to note that these chimes are not quiet, which you can see from watching more of the video. I had to interrupt the call to advise the 911 operator that her TTY would be making very loud sounds, indicating her position in the house, and alert her precinct to the intruder, and that she was likely not aware she was being so loud. We had to encourage her to be very brief with her words, to limit the sound she made, to give only her address, and then hide immediately without using the phone any longer because it would give her away. After typing only her address, she stopped typing back. So I switched my system over from T2A incoming translation to normal audio, so the 911 operator and I could both hear any ambient sounds on the line. After maybe 15 minutes of harrowing dead silence, we finally heard police knocking very loudly on the door. Not that the lady could hear this. They eventually got into the house, either through an unlocked door or maybe they broke it down, no idea. But after a while, an officer picked up the phone to let us know the situation was under control and that we could hang up now. No idea what resolution happened, but I assume she was fine. TLDR, a deaf person needed relay services to contact emergency services and uses a noisy device to report a break-in, not realizing their device is loud enough to give away their location in the house. Story 30, it is not me. My friend had to take care of a couple doing their thing in a tree. They somehow got stuck and had to call for help getting down. When he and his team arrived, he saw his cousin, off course, all naked. Story 31, I was told about one where a teenager had climbed into one of those baby swings at the park and gotten stuck. He had to be cut out of it by firefighters. Story 32, was about to leave after a really calm night shift. Take one last call. This guy just asked for an ambulance for his mother like so many early in the morning. No panic or anything in his voice, so as always I asked him what's happening before I transfer him to the paramedics. And he just said, well, I think I just killed her, but I'm not sure if she's dead yet. And he put the phone on the side. 30 seconds passed, no sound. He picked back up and tell me, well, I just made sure and stab her a few more times and put the knife in the sink. They'll be waiting outside by 9 years and still clear in my mind. Turn out he was mentally sick and her mother kept him home. Story 33, worked as a 911 dispatcher a few years ago. An old man called one day. He was all panicked. Just by hearing his voice, I was sure I was going to send the ambulance for his dead wife. I asked him a few questions about his address. And I asked him calmly, sir, what's the emergency? He was still panicked and told me with a shaky voice, my wife. She picked the margarine in the fridge, and it's all turned to oil. What should we do? I waited a few seconds expecting a burst of laugh, but no. The poor old man was serious. He had margarine issue and called the 911. Good times. Story 34, this one requires a little backstory before the actual call. We had a female that called quite often, even moved from our jurisdiction to another location. But because we were better at customer service, she wouldn't call them on 911. She'd call our 7-digit non-emergency line to get us. She called regularly, often for ridiculousness like the time. She told me her gay neighbors, who were abominations, were also watching her while she showered. Another instance, she called to let us know elves were at her house and had stolen both her hair and her uterus. Needless to say, not all there. Every time we ask her if she wants someone out there, and she always says no. Fast forward a while. She's in this other jurisdiction, so we can't respond, mind you, and tells us that a man was smoking cigarettes under her mattress. We go through the usual routines for her, and surprisingly, she says she wants someone over. We call the local PD and tell them the nature of her call, and politely suggest, due to her out-of-the-ordinary request to see someone, that they send someone out. Police arrived to find a homeless man smoking cigarettes under a bed, had pried open a window, and snuck in to get out of the weather. Few crazy, funny, weird calls that are just bizarre. Lady calls to complain that the power entering her house is now coming from a different direction, due to construction down the road from her to the north, and that it is causing power fluctuations. Being rational, I let it go and go to tell her that's a power company problem, not 911. She then says it's our problem because every time the power fluctuated, people entered her house. My personal login was that it must be interfering with her alarm. So I asked how they were gaining entry, to which she responded through my chest. My brain tried to rationalize it in any way I could, but nothing was coming to me short of someone tumbling into her home, which was absurd. So my next question was, what chest? Through my chest, from right between my breasts. She received a prompt response. Next up was the woman that gave me a general area to check because zombies were surrounding her house, and she wanted us to get out there and do what we do. Then there was Jesus, the Morning Star, the Trinity, who needed help because she had lost her throne and wanted help finding it. Story 35, I once dispatched a helicopter for a woman gored by a reindeer. Apparently, there is a reindeer farm for tourists, and she tried to kiss it. My pilot and flight crew laughed at the MOI and asked 3 times to repeat. Story 36 best memorable call I had was when I was still training. It was a few days into starting to take 911 calls on my own with my trainer, just listening in, and I get a very calm lady asking for paramedics. I asked her for the address and why my son cut off his penis. I parroted what I heard back while mentally I was going, "Excuse me, what?" Lady confirms that her son cut off his willy with a knife, and there's blood everywhere. Now the whole room is bustling, getting the resources I need for this guy with a knife who is probably bleeding out. I ask where her son is in the house, where the knife is, etc. When the lady can't really answer my questions, that's when I know something is up. She has no idea where he is, and she never saw him cut anything off. So I ask how she knew her son did this, and she replies, "I have visions and revelations. I can see the knife." Oh boy, it becomes a back and forth figuring out who her son is, and if anyone's even hurt. Lady even gave a neighbor's address instead of her own. Eventually we find her son's phone number through associations. The guy is actually just 2 years younger than her and a roommate. So my supervisor hops on the phone and calls the guy and cuts to the chase. "Is this so-and-so? Did you cut off your penis?" Edit spoiler, his penis was still attached to his body. That was almost 4 years ago, and I still bring it up to curious new trainees when they ask. Otherwise, the other few calls I remember: 1. A drug addict couple birthing their baby in a bathtub CPS. Got involved quick on that one. 2. Double homicide. Talked to the teenager that managed to run out of the house after an adult roommate shot and killed mom and the teen's boyfriend. Teen thankfully wasn't hurt and ran to a neighbor's house. She vividly remembered every detail and was very calm until officers were with her. She was a stellar RP and was very mature. I'm very proud of her keeping herself collected after seeing everything happen. I hope her life has turned for the better since then. 3. Suicide on the phone, my first one. Older guy called in from his house phone and very calmly started telling me his address, name, and date of birth. He proceeded to say to tell his family he couldn't take it anymore and asked us to turn off his front porch light when we arrived. Also gave us next of kin info. I tried talking to him, but he didn't even acknowledge me. He had made up his mind. I heard a metallic bang immediately after he gave me the last bit of instructions. First I thought I heard a metal chair or step stool fall on a tile floor. I kept an open line until officers were with him, confirming a self-inflicted gunshot wound through the left temple. Guy had a ton of health problems and just couldn't take it anymore. I can vividly remember the raspy and scratchy sounds I heard during the open line, which I believe were gasps, death rattles, and body twitches. He shot himself outside, so his family didn't have to deal with cleanup, and of course we had no other callers reporting shots fired in the area. Edit more suicide details. Story 37, another funnier style call that we had was during the winter. It was extremely cold for where we live, Alabama. In the single digits, we had been getting several calls about water pipes bursting. I took a 911 call right after taking 6 to 7 calls about pipes bursting. Naturally, the woman sounds very disgruntled and said that her water just broke at 3:30 in the morning. Me, not thinking, asked her who her water was through. She responds with, "What the hell are you asking me? My water just broke." That is when the light bulb lit up. She was pregnant. Baby was born healthy, by the way. Story 38, I am not the source. This happened to my brother-in-law. He was a paramedic, and his ambulance was responding to a call in the poor part of the city. A young girl was bleeding. They got there, and the girl said she was bleeding from her vagina. The mother was there, but was clueless. They looked around and counted the number of siblings. I don't remember the exact number, but it was over a dozen. The mother had never had a period in her life. She really did not know what it was and could not explain it to her daughter. This is my favorite true story of how messed up the welfare system can be. Story 39, not me. But my aunt is a dispatcher. She got a call a couple years ago from a guy who, had something stuck in him. She's actually dealt with this type of thing before. Anyways, paramedics get there and find out it was an entire butternut squash up this guy's, and he couldn't get it out. Story 40, my wife has worked the Poison Information Center for years. She has stories, such as this one guy called, clearly in pain, ill, and ease. And throughout the call, my wife could hear the voice of a woman laughing uncontrollably. Turns out the guy wanted a bit of quality intimacy with his girlfriend, who just wasn't in the mood that night. He can't sleep on account of this major case of blue. So he gets up, still in the dark, grabs the lotion, and heads to the toilet to masturbate. That's when the burning started. Turns out it wasn't lotion after all, but a tube of neat, so... The poor blue bald sumbitch is recounting this while in the throes of horrible dick hurt while his girlfriend is laughing hysterically. And the laughter gets contagious as first my wife. Then her coworkers all overhear what's happening and start laughing uncontrollably themselves. Told him to put it in a glass of cold ice water, with tears in their eyes. On the other hand, there was the time a guy called after his pet tarantula fanged him in the tongue after he put it in his mouth.